Okay, we're on Ayin Hamid Bays. Just over halfway down, 75B2, the second column. So the first part of the Mishnah, if she had they found the blemish. Yeah, I turned it on, yeah. Yeah. You have a question? Should I turn it off?
No.
Yeah, it's on. Yeah, maybe the volume was low. So the first part of the Mishnah, no, that's not it. If she had blemishes and she was still in her father's house, meaning there wasn't chuppah yet, then, and the husband is saying she has a mum, the kedushin is no kedushin, I'm not going to pay, the father needs to bring a proof that she already had these blemishes at the time of the kedushin, and therefore there was a valid kedushin, and if he wants to divorce her, he has to pay the ksuva. Once there was a chuppah, the husband has to bring a proof that she had these blemishes even before he gave her the ring, and he didn't know about it, and it was a mistaken kedushin. So the question that we dealt with is that the first half of the Mishnah makes it sound like the husband is believed that she already had the blemishes, and the father has to disprove that in order to say, no, the kedushin really did take place. The husband knew about it. And in the second case, once it's already in the possession of she already entered it, she already had chuppah, then the husband has to bring a proof. So meaning that the first case, we believe the husband that there was a blemish until the father proves that that the blemishes already existed before the kedushin and he should have known about it. So when the husband makes a claim, we believe the husband. But in the second case, when the husband says there's a claim, we don't believe the husband. We're believing we believe the father that the mumim were there, and the husband has to bring a proof. So how come in the first case we're believing the husband in his claim? In the second case, we're not believing the husband in his claim. So the first answer that we discussed last week with all the details is that the first case is Rabbi Yoshua. If we learned way back in the first parak that if a woman is pregnant and she's not married, so we don't know that she's married, and so we say, well, who's the father? Is he a mamzer? Is he a Kohen? Is he a goy? Is he a Yisrael? What's the story? So whatever she says, Rabbi Yeshua says we don't believe her until she brings a proof, and Rabbi Gamliel says we believe her. So the Gemara said in this case, the first case is like Rabbi Yeshua, the husband makes a claim, but needs to be so we know there's a problem. So the father would have to prove that no, there wasn't a problem. We need real evidence, like Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, that we don't believe her until she brings us real evidence. And the second case where the husband says that she had a mum, and we believe him until the father could bring proof that and we believe him until he can bring proof that the husband needs to bring a proof that the blemishes were there already. That follows like Rabbi Gamliel, who says we believe the claim. So the first answer was that's true. The first opinion, the Mishnah's, the first clause and the second clause of the Mishnah are written by two different Tanaim who argue on each other. So now we have a second way of explaining the first and second clause of the Mishnah. So 75b2, the second column, and it's just past. It's a little more than halfway down Ayin Hamid Beis. The first word on the line is Rava Amar. Reisha kan nimtzu v'kan hayu. The first case of the Mishnah, where we seem to be believing the husband and we're believing the husband that the blemishes just happened. The father has to bring proof that the blemishes didn't just happen. That's where these mumim are here, and they must have been here for a while. Since we're finding them now, we're saying they must have been here while since before the Kiddushin happened. Seifa, what? So we said if she's missing parts of her finger or an eye or parts of any limb or parts of her, or we spoke about bad sweating or bad breath. We were added things. Or if she has a peg leg, even though she's wearing a skirt, somehow I think if you're missing, the bottom of your foot or whatever, unfortunately, either, different examples over the years, stepped on a landmine or lived near, what's it called? In Ukraine. What's it, Ukraine? By, where the nuclear reactor blew up. What was it called? Chernobyl, or what's it called? Thalidomide. They're taking that medicine, and it was causing the limbs not to fully form. So different things, but
don't we need some objective medical evidence of that, or like husband claimed something and
right. So basically, we'll take a look. Yes, she's missing a finger. That is a mum. So then the question is, how long has it been there? Or maybe she has a prosthetic, so he didn't notice. Maybe she had a good prosthetic for her fingertip, and he doesn't know that she's missing her fingertip. And he, especially in time of the Gemara, he wanted to have her a job as a typist. And with a fake fingertip, she can't feel when she's pressing the button, the key. So it's a big mum. There's different. 20 years ago, most of the Orthodox girls were majoring in speech therapy or occupational therapy. 15 years before that, whatever, was medical billing, or whatever. I'm saying, so there's different professions and different. Right now, I don't know what the biggest major is. No, I don't think. It's based on jobs that they know are available in certain fields. So I'm saying, so at that time, for typing, if she has a prosthetic fingertip, she can't type. She can't type fast because she can't use that finger. So Reisha kan nimtzu v'kan hayu. In the first case, since they were found in.
It is not so critical because you have used your voice now.
That's true.
And it's gonna.
Okay, that's true, but still, for other things like medical billing, I don't think they're doing voice for that.
Not yet.
Right, not yet. So since the women were found, the blemishes were found in her father's house, we're saying they've been here all along. Seifa hanami kan nimtzu v'kan hayu. So in the second case of the Mishnah, where she's already in after chuppah, since they're found in her husband's house, we should say the blemishes first started in the husband's house. We didn't know otherwise, so therefore, unless her husband could prove that it happened beforehand, the husband's on the hook because he should have known about these blemishes. But Rabbi asked against this. So the Mishnah said in the second case, once there was chuppah and she moved into her husband's house, and now the husband is claiming she has a blemish and he wants to divorce her and he shouldn't have to pay the ksuva. The husband needs to bring a proof that she already had this blemish before they were engaged, before he gave her the ring. And so therefore the whole Kedushin was a mekach, so it was not based on a false premise. And the whole Kedushin wasn't a Kedushin, and he doesn't owe a ksuva, because he wouldn't have married her knowing that she had this blemish. So from this Mishnah, Abai is saying, Achlo Tisaris in. The fact that she had the blemish before the Kedushin, then it's a mekach tos. And we believe it. Misha Tisaris lo. But if he could only bring evidence that she had it after they had Kedushin, but before the chuppah, he's not believed, and it was a good Kedushin, and he's going to have to pay the ksuva if he wants to divorce her. Ramai. Why is the Kedushin a valid Kedushin if he could bring proof that the blemish happened before chuppah but after the Kedushin? Lema kan nimtu v'kan hayu. Why don't we say this chazaka like we say, or I don't know if it's a full chazaka, like according to what you're saying, once he could bring proof that the blemish existed before the chuppah, it were already in her father's house. So let's say that it must have been there even longer. Since we know that it was there after he gave her the ring, it must have been there before she gave the ring. So why don't we use that svara in the second case of the Mishnah? So Amar Le, Rabbi said, Mishna nisarsa mishum deikala meimer chazaka and adam shosa bekos elim kain bodko. Once we know that she already had the mum after he gave her the ring already, the father could say that there's a chazaka that he's not gonna. This is a euphemism. Someone's not gonna drink a cup unless he checked it first. Hi Rav and he's payesu. So since they already had kedushin, the father could claim the husband had ample opportunity to take a look at her and see that she doesn't have any blemishes. So but Abai asks again, nami. But if so, even before he wouldn't have given her kedushin, you should make this claim even before he gave her the kedushin. He wouldn't have given her kedushin had he known she had the defect. But rather there's a chazaka that a person can't be made to be okay with the mumim that he found in his wife. Hachanami chazaka inara mefayis b'mumin. So here, even though there's proof that she had the mum when they were engaged, but before chuppah, so Rava's trying to say that the father could say the fact that he went along and did chuppah shows that he must have checked her out. No, but we also know that the person's not okay with the mum. So the fact that he found that he's not going to be able to be okay with the fact that she had a mum. So Abai doesn't like Rava's answer still. Ella mishan isarsa mishum dikatarti chazaka. So Rava says when there's proof that the blemishes existed already after the kedushin, but before the chuppah, the husband still has to pay the ksuva if he wants to divorce her because of it. Mishum dikatarte chazaka. There's two chazakas that would say that that he should have known and therefore the kedushin is good. The first one is hamid hagufa chazkasa. There's a chazaka that normally most people aren't born with a defect or a blemish. The chazaka ein adam shosa bekos elim kain bodko. And there's a chazaka that a person won't drink of a makab unless he searched it out, unless he investigated it first. So this young woman or this girl had a chazaka that she didn't have any blemishes, and the husband did chuppah, or her now husband did chuppah, so he must have not noticed any blemishes at the time of erison. The high Rabbi Nispaisu, because he saw her and he was okay with it, because we have proof we have witnesses that who tell us that he knew of these blemishes before the chuppah, and he did chuppah anyway. It must be the high rub and he's He must have been okay with the blemish. My amart. So what can you say? Chazaka and moment. There's a chazaka that a person is not going to be okay with blemishes. So it's true that once if there's a blemish, someone's not going to be okay with it. But because there's two chazakas here, that either she didn't have a blemish or she did have a blemish and he knew about it, that overrides the one chazaka that if he knew that she had a blemish, he's not going to be okay with it. What? We mentioned last week that it seems that some of the things they didn't really see each other beforehand.
Yeah.
Now again, the Chazal said it's in the second parak of Kedushin that originally from a Torah level, the father's allowed to mekadesh his daughter, who's a katana, to whoever he wants. But midrabanan, they said he's not allowed to do that unless she's okay with it. She says, "I like Shmerel," so then he can marry her off, even though she's a katana, and it's not that her opinion has validity in order of making the kedushin, but it shows that she has to be okay with it.
So if husband is blemish, it's nothing.
He's not necessarily wearing a hat nowadays. With dating, it might be a problem if they don't take off their hat. No. So we said a couple weeks ago that there's a different level, that women are much rather. It's more important that a woman not be single, so she's not going to be so choosy about her spouse. But the man is much more choosy about his wife than the wife is about the husband.
Just blame some feminist.
But ad shalot tisares. But if we know that she had the blemishes before he ever gave her the ring, there's no chazaka that she was blemish free. If there's witnesses that her blemish was visible and known before she got engaged, so now there's not two chazakas why the husband should be okay with it, because we know that she had the blemish. So chazaka ma'ika, what are we left with? Chazaka de'ain adam shotza b'kos alim kain badko. So the only chazaka in favor of the father, meaning saying that the husband should have known because he should have investigated her, that's the only chazaka we have. Once we have evidence that she had a visible chazaka, visible defect before the ring was given. So that is countered. Adarabba is on the other side, or to the opposite perspective. The husband, if she had a mum, a person isn't going to be okay with it. So in that case, we should say that the money stays where it is, and since the money is in the husband's pocket, it stays in the husband's pocket, and he does not have to pay her the ksuva. So that's the difference between the first case and the second case. It has to do with chazakas that she didn't have that in the first case she didn't have a blemish, or when she got engaged, so we could say that the blemish didn't only happen now. Once she's still when it's before the chuppah, we say that because she already has it, the blemish now, she must have had it by the So once we know that she had the blemish in her father's house, we say she must have had it before. So the husband wouldn't have been Mekadesh her, and therefore the father has to prove that that the blemish happened after the Kedushin. He has to prove that it wasn't there earlier. No, that the husband has to prove that it was there. Okay. Rav Ashi gives a third explanation. Reisha manala abba biyad. In the first case, when the husband is saying that she has a blemish and he doesn't want to, he says, I wouldn't have been Mekadesh you. So she's saying it was there, but so if you want to divorce me, you have to pay the ksuva. It's a case where she is telling the husband, because when she's a ketana, if she's under 12 and the father married her off, and she would get divorced from the Erisin, the father would get the money because she's not her own legal individual yet. So if she had chuppah, once she had chuppah, we learned earlier that she fully leaves her father's house. And like about a month or 6 weeks ago, we learned that there's something called a yesoma b'chayav, an orphan in the life of her father. Meaning, if she had chuppah and then got divorced, she's in a state of legal limbo. Because she had chuppah already, she left her father's house. So her father can't marry her off again, because since she was married and now divorced, he does once, because she had chuppah, she left her father's rishus. But because she's still a ketana, she doesn't legally have a ability to accept kedushin from someone. So that's what we call yisoma b'chayav. So we know that if as a ketana she got divorced before chuppah, then the father would get the money because she hasn't left his rishus yet. And just like he could sell her in those to be an Amma Ivriya, and he would make money from selling her. And if he made Kedushin, when he gave her as for Kedushin, he got to keep the money of the Kesef Kedushin, he would keep the Ksuva. So in the first case, it's before the Chuppah, it's the wife, the girl is as if saying to the husband, you owe money to my father. So she's not really a party to the dispute.
She's capable to have children and raise them, but she's not eligible to handle money.
She's not a legal. She's not an adult legally to make monetary decisions.
No, it's similar to American law. You go to the army at 18, but you cannot start drinking until 21.
Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the reasons they had to lower the voting age also. They're sending them to the army and like, well, we would vote against this. So if you want us to fight, you have to let us vote. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. So Rashi's pointing out that according to Rav Ashi, the whole Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Gamliel, that we trust the chazaka of her body. But the problem is, in the first case, we can't trust her body because she's not party to the dispute. Because of the claim of her father against her husband, her father doesn't have the chazaka of not having a blemish. It's her chazaka. So the fact that it's her body, but her father's claim, we can't use her chazaka to help her father's claim. The seifa money libi adacha. But the second case is once there's chuppah already, if they get divorced, she would get the ksuva. Therefore, the chazak, she can use the chazaka of her body to support her receiving the money. Eisvei Ravacha Breda Rav Avia Ravashi, Ravacha, the son of Rav Avia, asking against Ravashi. Mo to Rabbi Meir, b'mumen haryun lavo imo mi beisavia sha'al harav l'haviraya. That there's a brisa that says Rabbi Meir agrees that if there's a blemish that are the types that would come with her from her father's house, sha'al harav l'haviraya. The father has to bring a proof that she already had the blemishes before. Va'amai. Why is that true according to Rav Ashi's explanation? Manali bi'adechahu. According to Rav Ashi, that's the claim. In the case of once the chuppah happened, it's a claim of her against her husband. So the chazak of her body could be used. Rabbi Meir is saying if it could have come from the house from before she was married, the chazaka, the father has to bring proof. But according to what Rav Ashi is saying, once the chuppah happened, it's out of the father's domain now, and now we should be able to use the chazaka of the wife. But according to Rabbi Meir, it's on the husband. Excuse me, it's on her father to show that she already had the blemish at the time of the erisin, and the husband should have known about it. And the fact that he didn't that he gave her kedushin in Nisun anyway shows that he's okay with it, with her having the blemish. So Hachamayaskinan biseres. This is a case where she has an extra finger. So there's no way that she grew another finger after she got engaged. She clearly was born with it. So I assume that in this case, but it would work even according to the previous answer, the second answer, because she doesn't have a chazaka that she was born without a defect. If the fact she has an extra finger now shows that she had an extra defect from birth, so the husband's claim is pretty strong, and that's where Rabbi Meir would say that the father has to bring a proof. But the Gemara and then asks Raya Yaseris Maraya Maisi. But if she was born with an extra finger, there's no proof that the father could bring to show that the defect came then. We know she always had it. What's he going to prove? So Raya Derav and Ispaesu. He could bring a proof that we could show that the husband did know about her extra finger and he was okay with it and married her anyway. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, 2 dots. About 2/3 down on Ayin Vav Amud Aleph, 76A2, the bottom of the first column. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Shmuel. So there's a halacha that if the two people, one has an ox and one has a donkey, or one has a cow and one has a donkey, and they're trading it with each other. So if you'd be selling things, you would need to make a kinyan. If it's something that's not real estate, you need to make a kinyan on each one. If you're buying real estate and movable properties, there's something called kinyan agav, where once you acquire the real estate, you could acquire all of the movable properties automatically also. But if you're exchanging things, you're trading, once the first person made a kinyan on his item, so once Reuven acquires item A, Shimon automatically acquires item B, even though he didn't make a chazaka. So in this case, a machlef b'chamor, one person has a donkey and he's exchanging it for the other guy's cow, and the guy who has a cow is exchanging it for the first guy's donkey. Umashach bal hachamar sapara, the donkey's owner leads the para. That's the way of doing a chazaka to show ownership of a cow. And the chamor wasn't there. Reuven was there and Shimon was there and the cow was there, but the donkey wasn't there. The donkey was still at Shimon's house. So Shimon, who had owned the chamor, he's buying the cow. So Shimon makes a kinyan on Ruvain's cow. Ruvain didn't make a kinyan on Shimon's donkey because it's not there. But halacha is when you're trading things, once the first thing transfers ownership, the other item also transfers ownership. But what happened here? They come back to Shimon's house to get the donkey. The donkey is dead. So the question is, when did the donkey die? If the donkey died before Shimon took the cow, they couldn't trade anything because it was already dead. And if it happened afterwards, so right, so then he lost out. It was a bad trade for him. But we don't know when the donkey died. So nowadays, if you have a camera with a timestamp in the barn, that might be acceptable for certain types of a monetary for certain types of proofs. I think they're using that now for Chal Yisrael to show that that they're not adding pig milk to the vat of cow milk. Some places were using it a little bit as a backup, but then with COVID, it became a much more needed thing when people weren't being allowed to go from here to there. I don't know how much now. There used to be a bunch of people used to go from Chicago to Wisconsin to watch the cows getting milked for Chal Yisrael. And unfortunately,
in Wisconsin, it's used that somebody had pigs milk to cows. It's like ridiculous. They have gazillion of cows.
yeah, so one of the names on our parochas, I think the lower name, Yirmiyahu, so he was killed in a car accident, and he was driving up to do the Chal Yisrael Hashgacha. His car was run over by a truck. But with COVID and people not crossing the state lines and this and that, so they had to come up with another thing. And so I think a lot of the kashrus agencies started using some of the cameras. So So albal hachamor lahavi raya shahaya chamor kaim b'shas mashichas para. So Shimon, the owner of the donkey, he has to prove that the donkey was still alive when he made the kinyan, when he was leading Bessie the cow. And therefore the acquisition took place. Shimon is now the owner of Bessie, the live cow, and Ruvain is the unhappy owner of the dead chamor. And if he can't prove that the chamor was alive at the time of that he made the chazaka, there's no one around and wasn't there. So then we say that the acquisition never took place because there was nothing to trade. And even though he led the cow, it's not his cow; it's still Ruvain's cow. So Ruvain, who previously owned the cow, still owns the cow, and Shimon, who owned the chamor, now owns the dead chamor. Nothing changed place. So here's the key thing: what?
The deal just canceled,
right? Because they were trading, but Shimon didn't have a donkey to trade because the donkey was already dead and he didn't know it. Vitana tuna kala, and a Tana taught that we learn a proof from this from the case of kala with the defect. So now the Gemara is going to say, is it the first case of the Mishnah or is it the second case of our Mishnah? So hi kala, which case of kala? Ilema, as we turn to Ayin Vav Amid Beis, if it's a kala b'veisavia, if it's the first case of the Mishnah, when the kala is still in her father's house before the chuppah. Midami, is it similar? Hasa Maisi Avrayo Mafik. If the father could bring a proof that she already had the vow, he's taking money away from the husband. Hacha Maisi Bal Chamor Raya Umokim. Where here, the Bal Chamor, if he brings his evidence that the donkey was still alive, he gets to keep the cow that he already made a kinyan on. So we're saying it's not an analogous case because in the Mishnah, the father of the girl brings proof, and then he gets to extract the money from the other guy. Here, when Shimon would bring the proof, Shimon is saying, well, this cow, which already is in my possession because I made the chazaka on it, stays in my possession. So it's not such an analogous case. So Rabbi Abba, so Rabbi says, Kala b'veis chamiyah. We have the proof from Shmuel that he brought this brisa that about this case of Kinyan is learned from Kala. That's the second case in the Mishnah when she was already in her father-in-law's house, meaning the father-in-law's house is another way of saying in her husband's house. It means that she got married, and so she's left her father's house. She's not in her father's house anymore. It's after chuppah. So so it ends up here. We're not talking about the ksuva, because if there was a mekach, so what happened in this case? Yisachar gave money to Zvulun. Yisachar said, "Zvulun, you have a pretty daughter. I want to marry her," and he didn't notice that she was missing a finger. So if he gave Zvulun $100, or he gave him a diamond for the kedushin of his minor daughter. So if it was based on a false premise, a mekach, the whole kedushin didn't take place. So then the father would have to return the diamond to Yisachar. Because if the kinyan took place on false premise, it didn't take effect, so the money has to go back. We're not talking about ksuva over here. We're talking about the actual money he gave for the kedushin, which we would in our parlance we would call it a diamond. Bakati lo dami, no, but it's still not similar. Hasan baal ma'isi rayu maro le'lechaske da'af. The husband bringing a proof that she had a blemish weakens the chazaka of the father. But hacha bal hachamor ma'isi rayu mokim chazaka biyade. But here, when Shimon, who owns the chamor, brings a proof that the chamor is still alive, he's upkeeping the chazaka of the cow that he already did that he already had. So it's true that using the second case solves the problem of bringing a proof to extract versus bringing a proof to keep, but a different part of the second case is not analogous to this, because in the Mishnah the father brings a proof that delegitimizes or damages the father's credibility of when the blemish existed. And here the Baal Chamor is bringing a proof. If he could prove that the donkey was still alive when he made the chazaka, he gets to keep the chazaka that he gets to keep the cow that Bessie the cow that he already made a chazaka. But in our Mishnah, he's not keeping the husband's witnesses that he could bring damages the father's credibility. So it's not analogous either. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Kala b'veisaviyah ula kiddushin. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says no, it is the first case in the Mishnah, but the Kala is in her father's house. But we're not talking about extracting the ksuva. We're talking about who gets to keep the diamond. And don't say that this is only according to the opinion that Kiddushin is not for being sunk. Meaning, if someone gives Kiddushin and then something happens, does he give up the money and he says she gets to keep it anyway? Or does he get it back like any other business deal that there was a problem on, that the money would go back? I think that the law, at least it used to be, that if an engagement got broken off, and this is in civil law in the United States. I mean, every state might be a little different, but I think most of them have the same law. She gets to keep the ring. I think even if she breaks it off, legally she gets to keep it, or in certain states. So that's according to this first thing. Once they got engaged in our halachic thing, once they had kedushin, she gets to keep the money. But Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is saying, even according to the opinion, even according to the opinion that the kedushin, that she would always get to keep the ring even if it gets broken off, that's when it was a good kedushin at the beginning, avo kiddushay tos. But if it was a case of a mistaken kedushin, in this case he wouldn't have been Mekadesh her had he known that she had the blemish. Imaisi raya in ilo lo. If he brings a proof, the father brings a proof that it was a good kedushin, then he would get to keep the money. Ilo lo. But if he can't bring a proof, then he doesn't keep the money. So that's how we're learning that Shmuel, learning the case of Reuben and Shimon, Reuben owed Bessie the cow and Shimon owed the chamor, and they were trading it, and so Shimon led Bessie the cow, and then they got back to Shimon's house, and the chamor was dead. It's up to chamor. Shimon has to prove that the chamor was still alive. Shimon has to prove that the chamor is still alive when he led Bessie the cow. And then he gets to keep the cow, and Reuven is out of luck. He has no cow, and he has a dead chamor. You can't beat a dead horse, but you could beat a dead donkey, apparently. Mesave, but they asked a question about Shmuel's din from a different halacha. So a cow has 4 stomachs. And not just a cow, but the animals, the kosher animals, they chew their cud, they have 4 stomachs. Animals that don't chew their cud, and humans who don't chew our cud, we have 1 stomach. But we have a digestive system that's long, but 1 stomach. The cows have 4 stomachs. The first one, they chew a little bit. It goes down. It's almost similar to our esophagus. And then the second stomach is the stomach that starts breaking down the grass a lot. And then it comes back up. And then when they chew their cud, which is they're swallowing the partially digested cow, it goes straight to the third stomach for the final processing. And then through the third, then it goes through a 4th stomach, and then it's that's the digestion. So if there was a needle found in the thickness of the Beis HaKosos, which is the second stomach of the cow. So the problem is, if there's a hole in any of the organs of the animal, it's a treifa. Even if it seems to be alive and well, we say it's not going to live out 12 months. So they shachted it, and they found that there's a needle there. So mitzad achar ksheira, if you could see it from only one side of the stomach, but not through the other side, it didn't fully pierce the stomach, from the wall of the stomach. So therefore, the animal is not a treifa. It doesn't have a hole through and through. So it's ksheira. Mishneit tzadim treifa. But if you see the needle goes through the whole side from one end to one side through the other side, then the animal is a treifa. Nimtzala. So nimtzala korei dam. If you see a little bit of blood on the needle, biyadua shu lifnei shchita, you know that it happened before it was shachted. So if the needle goes all the way through, it's a problem. If you see the needle went all the way through and there's no blood, that might be a reason to say that somehow the needle got in there after the shechita happened, and it's not a treifa, because when it was alive, the needle wasn't there. If it would have been alive, the stomach would have bled, and so there would be a little bit of blood on the needle. Lonim tila koretam, and if you didn't see a blood on it, biyadur shulach shchita, you know it must have gotten there after shchita. Huglad piyamaka, if there's a scab over the wound where the needle went, you know that it's been at least 3 days. It's been in there at least 3 days before the animal was shechted, because otherwise it wouldn't have been able to scab over. So it definitely was. It definitely would be a treifa, but this leads to a different question. So now the question is, we know it's treif, but the question is, if I went to Western Animals and I bought the animal, so they sold me an animal that was treif, and I went to buy an animal to eat, so I never would have bought it if I would have known it was a treifa. So if it already is scabbed, we know that it's been there at least 3 days, and if I only bought it yesterday or 2 days ago, it was already a treifa beforehand. So when I bought the cow, it's already a mekach taos, or the ox, whatever the animal it is, it's a mekach taos. It's a mistaken sale, because I would never have bought it knowing this. Now there's a Gemara somewhere else where they could argue I thought you were selling it to pull your plow. You weren't selling it. I wasn't. You didn't. I didn't know you were buying it to eat. If you were going to buy it to eat, I would have told you. I just thought you were buying it to pull you to pull your to pull the plow or to pull your wagon. So I think it might be in Chagiga, within like 30 days of one of the regalim, most people are buying it to bring a korban. So they're not buying it for work. So here's a case where that it's Yenam's livestock, the best tasting beef. So you're going there because you're going there to buy it to shach to eat it. We know you're not buying a work animal there. Lo hugla piyamaka, if where the needle was and it went through the whole wall of the fourth stomach hair, but there's blood, so that it's a treifa, but it wasn't scab. The question is when did it happen? Before the guy bought it, or after he bought it? So if it was before, if it was already there before he bought it, he would never have bought it. It's a false sale. The seller has to resell it, refund his money. But if it happened after he bought it, it's his loss. So the person who wants to extract money from the other one has to prove. So if he already paid, he has to prove that the needle was there beforehand. So now 76b3. And if he already paid the money to the seller, he would need to bring proof that the needle was already there when he bought it, and he will extract money from the seller who already has the money because he paid for it. Why would he have to do this? Let the owner of the animal bring a proof that the needle wasn't there, and he gets to keep his own money. If it's from our case, from our Mishna, let the shopkeeper say, it happened after I sold you the animal, unless you could prove to me that it didn't. So the Bala Behema should have to bring proof to keep the money, otherwise it should automatically go back to the seller. So the Gemara answers, "Below you have tabachi dame," because it's a case where he didn't pay yet. So therefore, since the money's in possession is 9/10 of the law in this case, so he has the money's still in his pocket, so it stays in his pocket. My pascha. So why did he teach it this way? That as if normally you pay when you buy it. So now this is an unusual case where the seller sold the animal without receiving the money yet. Why would he teach the case of an unusual case? So that's a good question. So Ella Kiesar Rami Bar Yecheskel Amar. So maybe it's your brother, Rami ben Yecheskel. Your brother's name Rami? Because you're Chaim ben Yecheskel. This Amora is Rami ben Yecheskel. So he said, Lo titzasi ulahani klali. Don't use these rules of Chal Yehuda, Achim Yishmei de Shmuel, that my brother said in the name of Shmuel, Hach Yamar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel really said. Basically saying you can't trust what my brother said. So Rami had a brother, Yehuda bar Yecheskel. But he's saying this is what Shmuel really said. Kol shenola tzafik b'shuso alav haraya. In whoever's possession the suffix arose, he has to bring a proof. B'tana tuna kala. And the Tan of our Brisa said this also in regard to a bride. So it wasn't about so Mesave, they asked against this. The needle that was found by the second stomach. So the whole thing. So and if the butcher didn't, or the guy who's going to be shachting the animal didn't pay the seller yet, the owner of the animal should have to bring a proof and take money back from the butcher. Why would that happen? Let the suffix happen when the buyer already bought the animal. So the Gemara says, "Diyav tabach demei," because this is a case where he bought it. He was COD, cash on delivery. He paid for it when he got it. So he has to bring proof if he wants the money back. Well, my paska. So why is it clear cut? Stama demilsa kamadol yav inish zuze lo yav inish chiyusa. It because the regular economy is COD. If you don't give me the money, the seller doesn't give you the animal. So the brisa was taught in a way that normally the business works. We'll leave it here at these two dots at the bottom of Ayin Vav Amid Beis.